And our songs are prayers. Our songs are not only things to listen to. Our songs are given purpose and they have direction. And the spirit world, which is always around us, they take notice when they hear these objects. They take notice when we speak of their name. They take notice when we think of them. You know, this life that we wake up to and have to have the honor and privilege and blessing to wake up to is a gift. And we have to be able to enjoy it to the best of our ability. And it starts every morning by giving thanks. And that's the most beautiful part about ceremony. This song that I want to sing for you again is a welcome song. It's one of our oldest songs. And in our language, it's Guano de. Guano is the welcome. And Aliyah Guano Day is we're all going to welcome. So we sing that song to our ancestors and we ask them to all come and join us. So think of your ancestors. Think of them. Give thanks for them. And in the same time as we did our smudge, we give thanks for all that we have to live for, all the people in our lives. So I'm going to sing this song, and we're going to call our ancestors in with us today.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful video with us today, Val. Evan always does a great job, and it's always, I've watched it a few times now, but I still enjoy it every time. So first of all, I'd like to start off by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which Wolastoqiyik and Mi'kmaq people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with surrender of lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. And the reason I speak to both Mi'kmaq and Wolastoqiyik territory is because JEDI serves all of New Brunswick, and New Brunswick encompasses Wolastoqiyik, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy territory. And our speakers today are from those areas, but if you are watching from another area, please be sure to acknowledge the land that you're in. I just have a couple of housekeeping things that I want to talk about. So Val Polchis, who just shared the video, she is a partner in communications, and Connor Bear is also joining us from communications at JEDI today. As you can see in the chat, we've already started sharing some links. Connor has shared a link for our webinar recording from last week. I will ask that if you have any questions for this webinar that's happening right now, please ask them in the Q&A. The Q&A is separate from the chat. That way we can just keep the questions a little bit separate. We are recording the video. I did remember to go Facebook Live while the prayer was going on, so it's missed the first little bit, but I still remembered, so we've accomplished that for today, so that's good. I would like to thank our sponsors, Farm Credit Canada, FCC, the Government of New Brunswick, Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries, CCNB, College Communautaire de Nouveau-Brunswick, the Atlantic Canada Fish Farmers, Artful Sciences, Ulnawig, and the Crown Plaza Fredericton. They all came on as supporters for our plenary, and we were happy that they agreed to support this webinar series as well. And you know, it's really great that we know that there's such support, especially for a webinar such as this on agri-food and agriculture. Now I would like to introduce you to the president of JEDI, Alex Deedham. Alex, if you would like to offer a couple of words of welcome, that'd be really great.
Yes. Welcome, everybody. On behalf of the Joint Economic Development Initiative, as mentioned earlier, JEDI for short, I would like to welcome all to the Agri-Food and Agriculture Growing Together webinar series. Today is our fourth of 5 webinars relating to agri-food and agriculture for Indigenous peoples in New Brunswick. Last week, we heard from Terry Sullivan, Senior Advisor on Aboriginal Relations with the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries, or DAF for short, and he gave us a quick overview of the department and what they do. He was followed by Ryan Bourgeois, the Director of Industry Financial Program at DAF, and Ryan shared information about the Indigenous Agriculture Development Program and some of the financing options that are available through that program. Next up was Jill Mulholland, who manages the Buy New Brunswick initiative and leads the renewal of New Brunswick's local food and beverage strategy. She provided an overview of the collaboration that has taken place to help move this strategy forward. Finally, we heard from Melissa Gauchel, the Manager of Business Navigation at Opportunities New Brunswick. She discussed how their Business Navigator program helps entrepreneurs sort out the regulations and processes involved in starting a business in New Brunswick. Overall, it was a very informative session. If you missed last week's webinar or would like to watch it again, the link will be shared in the chat. Today, we will hear from representatives from the Government of Canada as they describe how they can help support your business in agri-food and agriculture in New Brunswick. Some of the items they will discuss include the Indigenous Pathfinder services and Indigenous food programs that are available, Indigenous student recruitment opportunities in agri-food and agriculture, opportunities in research projects, and finally, we will hear from Indigenous Services Canada. We would like to thank Ben, Patricia, Dominique, Jose, Will, and Emily, who are joining us here today. I look forward to hearing their presentations. We know that all of our participants will enjoy learning about the services and programs that your organizations provide. Our funders and sponsors enable JEDI to host our events. We offer a sincere thank you to our sponsors, Farm Credit Canada, the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries, the College Communautaire de Nouveau-Brunswick, the Atlantic Canada Fish Farmers Association, Artful Sciences, Ulnawig, and the Crown Plaza in Fredericton, as well as our funders, Government of Canada and the Government of New Brunswick. Finally, I would like to thank all of you for joining us here today. Walalin, Oliwan, merci, thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome.
A pretty busy schedule, so I'm just going to jump right in. Our first presenters are Benjamin Zamit Mempel and Patricia Wallet. So Ben is a new Pathfinder with the Indigenous Pathfinder Services at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. He joined IPS working for the department as a research assistant based in Kentville, Nova Scotia on research projects including containerized hydroponic food production as well as winemaking. He holds a degree in science and business from the University of Waterloo, and he is Inuk Maltese. Patricia has a bachelor's degree in biochemistry from UNB, a biotechnology diploma from the New Brunswick Community College, and an adult education certification from UNB. Prior to joining Agriculture and Agri-food Canada, she worked for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency for over 10 years, taught the biotechnology program at NBCC for 5 years, and worked at the Research and Productivity Council for 4 years. As Deputy Director in the AAFC Atlantic Regional Office, Patricia and her team work with companies, producers, processors, and provincial organizations to promote AAFC's programs and services and advise senior management on major issues, activities, changes, decisions in the region. Welcome. So Ben and Patricia, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Gwen, for those introductions. I'll just get my presentation going here. Alrighty, so today I'll be talking.
And we can see your notes if you wanted to put it out to a full screen.
It should be, you can see the notes right now.
Well, we can see the next slide. So.
Oh, maybe, okay.
I think it's just your display settings.
How's that?
Much better, thank you.
Great, okay. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about the different AFC Indigenous programs and services, mainly about the Indigenous Pathfinder service that I'm a part of, and Patricia will also be presenting in this section. So the first thing I'd like to do is just provide a bit of a snapshot for Indigenous agriculture in Canada. The Indigenous people have been underrepresented in the agriculture industry for a while, but the department has seen a growing interest in agriculture among Indigenous communities, and also seeks to focus on supporting and increasing Indigenous-led and defined participation in that sector, in the agriculture sector. So you can see a few different stats there from StatsCan data about number of agricultural operators and things like that. But so first I'd like to talk about Indigenous Pathfinder service, which I'm a part of. So what we do is we provide personalized advice and guidance to Indigenous people or communities to help navigate the relevant support, tools, funding information that's out there when somebody's starting or expanding activities in the agriculture or agri-food sector. So what we do is kind of visualized in this image here. So we'll be contacted by an Indigenous community or person, and we provide, we're sort of a repository for connections as well as information on all the different resources that are out there. So one of the main things that we do is we know a bit about the AFC programs that are specifically for Indigenous people, which I'll be discussing after this. One of those is the Indigenous Agriculture and Food Systems Initiative, IAFC for short. We also have knowledge about all the AFC programs that are out there. So that includes things like agri-insurance, which are available to all agriculture producers. We often connect our clients to development agencies. So for New Brunswick, that would be, connecting somebody to the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. We have connections to scientists if a project is maybe science or technology based. We often refer clients to other government departments if it's not necessarily related to agriculture or if it's in conjunction with something else. And we inform, sometimes we inform policy work when people are looking for the types of requests that we're getting. So Patricia will be talking about the Market Industry Services branch later on, so I won't talk too much about that. But we also provide industry connections, as well as maybe connecting to Indigenous financial institutions, so something like Untitled. We're knowledgeable about the overall landscape, and then try to provide a path forward for the people who contact us. So just a quick example of what that might look like. If somebody came and had an idea about maybe starting an agricultural food hub, we could point them in the direction of the Indigenous Agriculture and Food Systems Initiative, as well as the Local Food Infrastructure Fund, two programs that Agriculture Canada administers, which I'll discuss today. We could point them towards Indigenous financial institutions, as well as provincial programming that exists in that province. Another example would be, say somebody had an idea for a fish cannery, maybe it's in Nova Scotia, we can connect them to the Opportunities Agency, as well as the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, as well as the provincial departments of fisheries that are relevant. So whatever it is, whatever the request is, we'll try and point somebody in the direction that'll be beneficial. So now I'd like to talk about the Local Food Infrastructure Fund. So this is a program that is aiming to strengthen food systems to facilitate access to safe and nutritious food for at-risk populations, which in the context of this, this program includes Indigenous people. So this program will fund projects that are trying to provide food at or below cost, and below cost includes maybe no cost. So it's quite involved in sometimes food bank related operations that have to do with agriculture or food infrastructure somehow. The projects have to be sustainable once funding ends, but projects can be funded up to $250,000 in a new stream that's starting in this program. The second stream. The first stream was up to $25,000, and it funded 362 projects in the last round. So I'd just like to provide a few examples of what has been funded in the past through the Local Infrastructure Fund to give you an idea of that. So a First Nation Healing Center received some funds for starting a community garden. There was also money provided to the Lutzel K Dene First Nation for meat and fish processing equipment. That type of thing is part of the food infrastructure and may have been excluded from agriculture programming in the past, but through this program, it's included, and that this could include something like harvesting equipment for meat and fish as well. So it's pretty broad. Something like an ATV could be considered harvesting equipment as well. The Heart Lake First Nation received $25,000 for expanding their community kitchen with commercial equipment to be able to provide meals to the community. And also Beaver First Nation received some funds for a large scale garden in their community. The Indigenous Agriculture and Food Systems Initiative is a little different from the Local Food Infrastructure Fund in that it focuses more on economic development opportunities for Indigenous peoples and communities in Canada. It's a little larger than the Local Food Infrastructure Funds, up to $500,000 per year, in terms of how much can be funded per project. Again, I'll just list some examples for what has been funded to give a good idea of what could qualify under the IAFC program. The Cree Nation of Nemaska started a vertical farm, a vertical smart farm, and received funding for that. Cowassess, they received funding for agriculture business planning. So IAFC can support business planning activities as well in the agriculture sector. It can also support training for operations, as we saw with Quadacha First Nation. So if training needs to happen for, I guess, something like a hydroponic greenhouse, that can be funded through the Indigenous Agriculture and Food Systems Initiative. And then lastly, the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq was supported in its endeavor to plan and train for the cultivation of non-timber forest products, which is also very cool. So the last, I guess, agriculture specific program relating to Indigenous people that I'll talk about is the Agri-diversity program. So this one's trying to help underrepresented groups in Canadian agriculture, including Indigenous people, to fully participate in the sector, and often funds projects that are more national in scope. So things like conferences and learning opportunities are more suited towards this, to the Agri-diversity program. So different projects that have been funded through this include an Indigenous Agriculture Summit. The Native Women's Association of Canada also had Indigenous Women in Agriculture grassroots engagement that was supported. And the Northern Farm Training Institute in Yukon was also supported in their Northern Diversity in Agriculture learning sort of program. So yeah, projects that are sort of more targeted towards national and in scope, I guess. Now I'd like to talk about the different risk management programs that have been mentioned actually in this series so far, but are very important to all farmers, including Indigenous producers. So I probably won't have time to talk about all of them, but things like the agriculture or agri-insurance business risk management program it's sort of a cost-shared insurance program. So we all know how damaging production losses can be, and when those costs and those premiums are shared with the government, it's a very valuable option for producers. The PowerPoint will be shared afterwards, so we can see the whole list. But there's quite a few programs that are out there on the federal scale, and this is Canadian Agricultural Partnership programs as well. So they're jointly administered with the provinces too. So they can all be found on the AgPal website, which is linked in the bottom of this slide here. It's an online tool to help discover the relevant federal and provincial resources, which are numerous and vary from province to province. So it's a great place to start. Something like agri-science, which supports these leading edge technologies, could be relevant to a program, or to a project. So part of what we do at Pathfinders is making sure that if a project is relevant to agri-science, we'll mention that that's an option. Now I'd like to pass it off to Patricia to talk about the Market and Industry Services branch at Agriculture Canada and what they do.
Can everybody hear me? Yes, okay, perfect. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Gwen and Valerie and Alex for doing these webinars. I think they're really great. So I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about the Market and Industry Services branch, for which I'm a part of. So this is a branch within Agriculture, Agri-food Canada that supports the development of the ag sector in general. It also supports agricultural interests in the international trade negotiations, for example, and it works closely with industry and provincial partners with the goal of having a more competitive agricultural sector. So within this branch, there are the regional offices, which are basically the boots on the ground for Agriculture Canada across the country. So for example, I am part of the Atlantic Regional Office, and I'm based out of Fredericton. And there's regional offices across the country. So what we do in the regions or in the provinces is we connect with provincial governments We gather information on issues, on priorities, on challenges that companies, producers, and processors are facing. And we communicate this information to senior management in order to provide a complete picture of what the industry is facing on the ground in the regions. So that's a very important role that we play. The other things that we do, we're involved, as Ben mentioned, in the Canadian Agricultural Partnership programming. So we help support and promote AFC programming and provincial cost shared programming that's supported by the Canadian Agricultural Partnership. And we also represent AFC in the regions when the minister comes in the region or when senior management comes and does outreaches. And we also are the lead for emergency management. So if you go to the next slide, Ben. So in New Brunswick, in regional operations, we're a large team of three. So myself, I'm the deputy director. So I deal a lot, my role is more, I represent AFC on a number of stakeholder working groups, for example. I am still part of the Indigenous working group for the development of the New Brunswick local food and beverage strategy. That's one example. I was involved also with the development of the industrial hemp strategy with the province. I liaise closely with provincial counterparts, such as with Opportunities New Brunswick, with Terry Sullivan at the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries, for example. And another part of my role is I'm the Atlantic lead for the Indigenous file within AFC, within Market and Industry Services branch. And I'm also the lead in Atlantic for the cannabis file as well. So that's sort of a nutshell what I do. And then I have two industry development officers that work across the province. So they also promote programming, work with clients. They each have their own sort of niche sectors. Jean is based out of Moncton. For example, he's the lead for the maple, the seafood sectors, all the supply managed sectors such as poultry, egg, red meat, dairy, also bioproducts, bioenergy, and food processing. Julie Root is a senior industry development officer with us, who just joined us in June. So she has also some niche sectors within the province. So for example, her biggest sector would be potatoes. It's a big one for New Brunswick. But she also does like small fruit, tree fruit, greenhouses and field vegetables and things like that. So we are there for your benefit. Please feel free to contact us so that we can help you connect with AFC services and programming. And we can also, we're also aware of other initiatives that New Brunswickers have access to or in the province. So we can also, if it's something that we can't, our program and services can't cover, we can connect you with our colleagues provincially and federally that can also assist. So that's sort of the message that I wanted to give today. Thank you.
I see you're running quite a bit behind, so I'll just move along. Yeah, contact us if you would like more information on Pathfinders as well. So we got the email and phone number there. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ben and Patricia. There was a lot of information in there, and people have already, we already got that question in the Q&A. Will this PowerPoint be shared? And Ben mentioned that it will be once the webinar is over. I'll get the presenters to send me their presentations, and once I have that all organized, I will send them out. Sometimes it doesn't happen the day after. Sometimes it takes a few days. I only got last week sent out this morning. So just bear with us, but I will send it out to you, okay? Now I would like to introduce Jose Owens. Jose studied agriculture and horticulture before joining Agriculture and Agri-food Canada in 2000. She spent many years leading a science program on sustainable vegetable cropping systems for Atlantic Canada. She is passionate about science that supports real-life solutions to food security needs and environmental health and agricultural landscapes. José is now the Associate Director of Agriculture Canada's Fredericton Research and Development Centre. Welcome, José. José, you're muted.
I know, it takes me a while to find the button. Every platform has the button in a different place. So I'm just gonna work at sharing my slides here for a sec. Bear with me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk a little bit about our student recruitment initiative and some programs we have going on within our science and technology branch. Bear with me, I'm still trying to get it into the correct format. Slideshow. Okay, can everyone see?
Yeah, it's ready to go.
Okay, and I appreciate that we're running a little bit behind time. So, and also this morning as I was reviewing my slides, I thought, oh, you know, I enjoy being a government employee and I enjoy talking about my programs, but I really love agriculture, so I'm going to go a little bit off script too. So, so bear with me, but the off script should be quicker than going, you know, slide by slide and everything. So hopefully it will be a good experience. Okay, so I seem to be partway through. One of the things that's come to our attention in science and technology branch with AAFC is that Indigenous people are really underrepresented. So we talk about STEM. Oh, well, we have a lot of groups that are underrepresented in STEM. STEM basically is the hot button word for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and it can include any number of other things. And one of the things that we find in Indigenous communities is there's not necessarily many role models. And sometimes we need to see it to be it, or see it to become it. And there aren't necessarily tons of Indigenous scientists to be role models in communities. So that's one factor. Also, agriculture, we have to kind of acknowledge that it's become this big export thing, a colonial version of agriculture, and it doesn't necessarily resonate very well for some people in Indigenous communities. But there's a much bigger picture to it. Agriculture can be so many different things, and it is about food systems, it's about food security, it's also about the environment and our interactions in producing food and what it does to the environment. It's about local food, carbon sequestration, climate change. It's about business opportunities. It can be about so many things. So it's important to remember that. One of the things that we thought we should do in order to be able to increase the representation of Indigenous people in our science and technology branch is to start young. So with high school and with college students or university students, and to recruit and give an experience, which is our summer students can gain experience in any number of different fields. And at least learn what a career in science looks like. It's hard to imagine it if you aren't in close proximity. So we want to increase the hiring of our Indigenous students. We have 20 centers across the country. So if there's one center, you know, say in Fredericton, we do a lot about potatoes and crops. But if you know you want to learn about animals, or you want to learn about food science, we have centers for that. And you know, I'm happy to make the links. So if people know students that are interested in exploring some of these areas, I want to help. We also want to enable so that Indigenous students to experience careers in agriculture, in the public service, and in STEM. And then we're also willing to make some extra efforts to try and bridge Indigenous students into permanent jobs after they finish their studies. So it's and we have jobs in weeds, in regenerative agriculture, global information systems, so many different areas. So I feel confident that at least some of our areas would resonate with almost any student that's interested in science and biology. In terms of our Indigenous students, we also recognize that sometimes it feels like it might be hard to fit in. And so we have some community efforts. We have an Indigenous network circle. We have elders that are in contact with our Indigenous students, and there are activities, awareness activities, and a lot of different things going on within our department, communities of practice, in order to help people to not only feel at home, but to help spread awareness of different cultural aspects and perspectives and diverse perspectives. This is just one example of a student. Alicia Jones was in her third year at Vancouver Island University, and she got on working as a summer student with a berry breeding program at the Agassiz Research and Development Center. You know, we have a student at our Fredericton Center who got on working with one of our entomology teams studying insects as crop pests. Anyway, this student, Alicia, said, the community here is so supportive, including AFC's elder, Mervyn Traverse, and AFC's former student advisor, Darren Cook, who took the time to meet with me and offer advice. It was comforting to know that they were available for help or guidance. So it's a program that really aims to support students, not just sort of bring them in the door and then leave them hanging. So I can't see the top of what that says. Just trying to think, like I can't move, oh, I can move the bar. So, another aspect is the interdepartmental STEM initiative. So this is kind of exciting. What we find is sometimes the Indigenous students are coming to us and they're saying, well, I don't necessarily see myself in agriculture, but I'm very drawn to marine biology. You know, now we're putting together our efforts to try to be able to hook students up with opportunities in fields that they want to be in. So if agriculture isn't right for you, I can still help make the contact for you at fisheries and oceans, for example, and those types of things. So our science departments are finally getting some coordination together on this level, and I think that's a good thing. Okay, hang on, I just need to figure out, no, it's not, oh, there we go. I mentioned the Indigenous Network Circle. So Indigenous people have a special place to be able to discuss issues faced by Indigenous employees, provide a forum where Indigenous employees can come and learn, and it's a safe space. And they conduct numerous activities and webinars and interesting things. And they even have a beading circle every Friday. So kind of some neat things for our employees. We have some communities of practice. There's a lot of things that are really interesting as we start to look at how to work with Indigenous communities or to take Indigenous knowledge and use it to inform our science. And so there's ways of becoming involved in communities of practice as well that discuss lots of these sort of systemic entrenched barriers to these topics, the trust and partnerships, Indigenous knowledge and data management and ownership, and other aspects. And then we have this new Indigenous Agriculture Science Partnerships Fund. So it's basically a small fund within Science and Technology branch where the idea is to respond to opportunities to build trust and catalyze agricultural development. It's in our science portfolio, but we're acknowledging here with these kinds of projects that sometimes we don't know if it's actually going to be an agri-science project that comes out of this, or if once the relationship building happens and the conversations are had and the outcomes are explored, if it turns out to be another kind of program that needs to come to bear. So it's kind of an interesting fund that way. For science and tech, it's completely new because we generally are more in the sort of very quick, we need to have the science project proposal, we get the funding, we do the project, we push out the publications or the deliverables. This is completely different style for us, and so it's really exciting to see us being able to take that more participatory approach, and more time to consider, time to listen, time to understand, to design projects that are going to have outcomes that are really relevant. And so this is where I kind of go off script. Because one thing I know is that when sometimes I talk about, well, you could mount a project, you could get in touch and we could try and go for a project under that fund. People say to me, yeah, but what if I don't know which agriculture is possible for me or my community? You know, what if I don't have any land? What if I don't have experience? Some people want to generate income. What if I want to make food? What if I want to make a political statement? What if I don't want pesticides? There's a lot of questions, but there isn't necessarily the idea that's a nucleus of a project. And sometimes it comes back to that idea of those images that we see over and over again about what agriculture is, and saying, well, gee, I don't know if this really fits for me. So I know that there's some communities that might want to go into a large-scale commercial agricultural venture like this. And I know that there are some communities that would never want this, but it doesn't have to be this. I sort of say to people sometimes, if I give you a picture like this, I mean, it could be a picture of almost anything. I could give you a picture of 2 rabbits and we could do the same kind of exercise. What do you see here? You could see any number of things. You might see a community garden, okay? A community garden is a form of agriculture. You might see better nutrition for your kids, more vegetables on the plate. You might see a business opportunity. You might see a political statement, right? Because growing local food isn't necessarily cheaper, but sometimes it's about making a point about what your rights should be. It could be viewed as a place to teach and to learn skills. You could talk about it as your means of production and whether means of production is a right or something that everyone should have access to. You might think of it as a healthy place for youth to spend time, a place to heal from trauma. I was involved with a garden in Moncton that was run by a community of African refugees where they worked in the community garden as a method to heal from the trauma that they'd experienced in places like Rwanda, for example, horticulture therapy. It's still agriculture, but the purpose isn't necessarily food. You might see this as a beautification of the neighborhood, a way to reclaim and make use of waste land, a source for ceremonial plants, a gathering place. There are so many things that this could be, and any number of those outcomes could be the basis for a project, in addition to the usual ones, a business opportunity, generate income. People, when they look at this, they might say, oh, it's a box. What do you do with the box? Well, nowadays with agriculture, you don't necessarily need a whole lot of land. Sometimes you need a box. And inside the box, you might be able to do a hydroponic production or an insect protein enterprise or any number of other things. So it comes down to what is it that you want to do and what suits you. So when we talk about that fund and we talk about using funds to support ideas for communities, basically we have to start a conversation. If a community or group is interested, I want to have that conversation with you to explore the ideas around what are the challenges you face or the opportunities you want to take advantage of, the approaches that you find interesting, to take the time to define what you want to achieve and focus in on how to get it, and figure out whether agriculture could hold part of that solution and what the agriculture needs are. So my wheelhouse is science and technology, but sometimes what you need is to be hooked up with expertise, or you need to gain a know-how, or you need marketing, or you need some of all of those things. And so that's how you basically would go about forming the nucleus of a project that might be able to get funding under such a program. So just to wrap up here, I've got a few take-home messages. AFC has opportunities for Indigenous students to learn about science and technology. Fredericton alone at our research center, we hire up to 30 students every year, and we're a small center. And if you're open, or your students are open to traveling a little bit away from home, there's opportunities for them in Prince Edward Island, there's opportunities for them in Kentville, there's opportunities for them farther afield all across Canada. AFC will make special efforts to recruit Indigenous students after they're finished their studies. And we want to help those students find jobs with other science departments if they prefer. And we want to start to bring those perspectives to the science that we're doing and the way that we do science. AFC is dedicating some effort and funds to doing science in these different ways that suit long-term relationships with Indigenous communities. And finally, in these new ways of working, taking time to build a relationship, understanding context, needs, and desires is a valuable endeavor worth investment. So I hope I didn't go over my allotted 10 minutes, especially when I promised to go short.
Well, Well, Jose, you had a lot of good information there. I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen. So yeah, it is 2:52. We still have a set of speakers left. So what I'm going to remind everyone is that we are recording this. If you do have to leave at 3, we'd be sad to see you go. But we will be recording this and emailing it out to you later, so you will have access to all of this information. I will also be sharing all of the PowerPoints because there is a ton of information today. Right now, I'm going to jump right into our third and last 2 speakers. So Will Green is originally from Australia and has lived and worked in both small communities and large cities. He now calls Sackville, New Brunswick home, where he lives with his family and enjoys gardening and sailing. Will's professional experience includes more than 15 years working for provincial and federal government in science, risk management, and planning. Will joined Indigenous Services Canada 2 years ago as a regional program development advisor in the Intergovernmental Relations and Partnerships team. Before this, he was the manager of air quality and climate change programs for the government of Nova Scotia. Joining him is Emily McDonald, who has been with Indigenous Services Canada First Nations Inuit Health Branch for 3 years. She is currently the acting community nutrition advisor in the region. Her substantive role is Senior Project Officer, Healthy Communities. Prior to joining FNIHB, Emily worked with the Nova Scotia Health Authority as a public health nutritionist, supporting the interpretation and implementation of the food and nutrition policy for Nova Scotia public schools. Emily is passionate about wellness and enjoys her involvement with the FNIHB Wellness Committee as the Atlantic Rep. Take it away, Will.
Thank you very much, Gwen. Good afternoon, everyone. And thanks to everyone at JEDI as well for organizing the event and giving Indigenous Services Canada the opportunity to present here today on the work that we've been doing in this area in the region. So, wow, great presentations today, along with all of the other presentations that I've been following along for the last few weeks. I've been taking away so much great information, and it is really clear that, you know, First Nations, governments and industry really do share common goals in this growing together that we've been talking about. As you heard in the previous presentations here today, the main federal lead on agri-food sector development is our colleagues there at AAFC, and also, you know, for New Brunswick, the Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries. There's a lot of different programs that we've been hearing about, and there's a lot of different ways that communities can be supported in these goals. And I'm thinking it's probably a challenge to sift through them all, which is why we have the Pathfinders. And I just want to make the point that although Indigenous Services Canada's focus has really been more on the food security side, we do really want to be there to help streamline, you know, community access to programs and services. We might be often the first point of call that a community will have to talk about, you know, a project idea that they have. I did want to make the note that I also, I copied and pasted a link to our Community Opportunity Readiness Program, the CORP program that many on the call will be familiar with, just so that, into the chat there, just so that everyone can keep our economic development staff in mind, because they might be able to help with the right project as well. In our presentation today, Emily and I are going to be sharing some of the information about the programs and community partnerships that our department has had in this area. Mainly, as I said, food security, but health and wellness programs, community planning, and probably be touching on approaches to service delivery as well. So I want to just jump back a little bit and do a quick refresher on the department. Indigenous Services Canada. There's been a few changes recently, important changes that I just wanted to mention. You might be aware that, you know, the former INAC split into 2 separate departments, Indigenous Services Canada and Crown Indigenous Relations. Indigenous Services Canada, who are us, our mandate is really around developing and delivering holistic approaches to social, healthcare, and infrastructure services to our Indigenous partners. And just recently, we launched a new 5-year strategic plan for the department. And that talks about working with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis to, 1, improve access to high quality services, 2, improve the well-being of Indigenous communities across Canada, and 3, support Indigenous people in assuming control and delivery of services at the pace and in the ways that they choose. So that's sort of where I'm coming from, just in the introduction to this. The other thing that I really wanted to stress, one key initiative sort of aimed at supporting those goals for our department has been transferring the First Nation and Inuit Health Branch at Health Canada into the department, so that we have the health experts integrated there at the office, with our social infrastructure and other experts to really support communities in the best way. Second, I wanted to mention that we're working really hard to provide high quality services and making the community priorities the focus of our work at the office. You can see on this slide, within our organization, there are a lot of different program areas providing services, support, funding. I work as part of a team called the Integrated Community Approach Team, where we work with the philosophy of sort of listening to community priorities and then working to bring the right people together at the right time to help the community achieve those. And I would say, especially if they don't fit neatly in one of our traditional program areas that's listed here. And I think, this agriculture and agri-food, food security area is one area, and that's sort of why I've become involved. And just a little bit of background, I'm also been involved with New Brunswick's local food and beverage strategy for a while. And I help to administer comprehensive community planning support at the department for communities who want to, take that 10,000-foot view of the community and do some visioning work about where the community wants to go long term. That's where I just wanted to leave off and hand over to Emily. I know time is short here. Emily's from our Health Promotion Disease Prevention Directorate within the former FNIB, and she's going to be speaking a lot about the programs around food that she's familiar with. I have my contacts at the end if anyone wants to follow up with me on any questions or in the future. I'd be happy to do that. Thank you. So
Great.
Passing you, Emily.
Okay, thank you, Will. Hello, everybody. So I'd like to start just with a common definition of food security. This was developed at the World Food Summit in 1996, and it was endorsed by the Canadian government. So food security exists when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food to meet their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. However, food security has unique considerations and implications for First Nations and Inuit, and we'll look at that over the following slides. So you could change the slide, Will. Thank you. So I'd like to start with this study, the First Nations Food, Nutrition, and Environment Study. It's the first comprehensive study to address gaps in knowledge about the diet, traditional food, and environmental contaminants to which First Nations are exposed. This study is the largest nutrition, food security, and food safety study conducted in Canada with First Nations. It was a long-term study implemented over 10 years across 8 different regions in Canada. So you can see at the bottom of the bars, data was analyzed and published at different times. So this particular study is so important because there have been gaps in our understanding of dietary patterns, nutrition and exposure to contaminants from food because of the exclusion of First Nations populations on reserve from other nutritional, like national nutritional studies. So what the data shows us is that there's a very high prevalence of food insecurity among First Nations people in Canada. Approximately 48% of First Nation households are food insecure, and these rates are anywhere from 3 to 8 times higher compared to the general Canadian population. So such evidence, it shows that food security is an urgent issue for First Nations. And in the Atlantic region, food security has been a concern for many, many years. The COVID-19 pandemic has certainly amplified these issues, and they've become even more pronounced. So multiple levels of community leadership have been voicing the need of enhanced work towards food security over the last 3 to 5 months during this response. And again, it highlights the urgency of the issue of community food security in the region and across the country. Thanks, Will. Next slide. So on the previous slide, we talked about some data and what is available, First Nations data, and how it demonstrates a very high prevalence rate of food insecurity among First Nations people in Canada. And in order to close gaps in nutrition and food insecurity, mechanisms have been, but need to continue to be co-developed with First Nations and Inuit to address weaknesses in policy and program approaches. So I wanted to share this model. This is the conceptual model for promoting food security in First Nations and Inuit communities. And this was developed by the Food Security Reference Group. At the time, it was based on best available evidence, academic expertise, as well as extensive input from various First Nations and Inuit partners and stakeholders. So this conceptual model is a framework. It can be used to guide the development of commercial and community initiatives that promote food security in First Nations and Inuit communities. As well, it can guide the review and evaluation of existing interventions or initiatives. The model was also developed to help articulate a definition of food security that is specific to First Nations and Inuit, and to help conceptualize how it can be improved, given that food security is such a complex issue. So the components of this model relate to various elements of food security for First Nations and Inuit. And by looking at the relationship between context, influencing factors, points within traditional and market food systems, we can identify areas where efforts to promote food security may be placed. So next slide, Will. So having looked at some of the unique considerations and implications of food security specific to Indigenous communities, I'd like to share another definition of food security. So food security for First Nations and Inuit includes access to sufficient, safe, nutritious store food and/or traditional country food. And access requires that nutritious foods are available and affordable in community. Traditional or country foods are an important source of nutrients for many First Nations and Inuit. So the study that I had previously mentioned, the First Nations Food, Nutrition and Environment Study, measured the financial ability of households on reserve to purchase store-bought food. And access to traditional foods was captured through questions about harvest practices, barriers to traditional food use, and adequacy and availability of traditional food supplies. Findings revealed that approximately 48% of households are food insecure, so we saw that on the previous slide, and that approximately 47% of families would run out of traditional foods before they could replenish their supplies. So insufficient employment and wages relative to food costs and insufficient availability and access to traditional food systems were key contributors to the very high levels of food insecurity found in the study. And just to note that the importance of traditional and store-bought foods for First Nation, Inuit, and Métis is also highlighted in the Eating Well with Canada's Food Guide, First Nations, Inuit, and Métis Guide. And the food guide reflects the importance of both traditional and store-bought foods for Indigenous people, highlighting the diversity of traditional foods across Canada and just showing some examples of foods that are representative of traditional food from across the country. Next slide, Will. So on this slide, I thought I would just pull out some examples of how Indigenous Services Canada, I'll speak from a health promotion, disease prevention perspective, but broadly how we can apply the conceptual model to some of our community-based work. And so starting with that inner yellow ring, I'll call it yellow, points within the traditional and market food systems. There's the Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative as part of a healthy living program. And through the Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative, there's ongoing food security and physical activity funding. And over the last 10 plus years, communities have developed projects that enhance various points within the traditional food system, including purchasing community freezers for food storage, promoting traditional harvesting practices with a focus of bringing elders and youth together so elders can share their traditional knowledge, as well as the creation of vegetable and fruit box programs to improve distribution and consumption of healthy foods. Then looking at the orange circle in the middle, the orange ring, influencing factors. In 2018, the Atlantic First Nations Chronic Disease Prevention and Management Strategic Action Plan was officially launched in the Atlantic region. And this plan is grounded in the Indigenous determinants of health with a very strong focus on building safe and supportive environments. So the influencing factors, they really, they're very similar to the social determinants of health and the Indigenous determinants of health. So Indigenous Services Canada has been able to support the implementation of this strategy through time-limited project funds, both in 2018-19 and 2019-20. And again, these funds have taken a very strong focus on building safe and supportive environments, including a lot of work to enhance food systems. Then looking at the gray ring, the outer ring context, Indigenous Services Canada, ISC, we work across department as well as with other federal departments to try to align food security actions, as well as collaborative work with provinces to try to promote and enhance service delivery on reserve. And then last, you'll see the arrows that feed into this model. They're funding, evidence-based, and partners. Indigenous Services Canada supports community-led discussions, bringing diverse stakeholders together. Having referenced the food and nutrition study, we work hard in health promotion, disease prevention, and other directorates to bring in best available evidence to support funding decisions as they pertain to infrastructure and supports for community to access health enhancing services and systems. So we'll move on to the next slide. So while Indigenous Services Canada, we're not the experts in farming per se, but there are many opportunities that we can support those who are the experts, both in the federal sphere and community and entrepreneurial spheres. And some of the ways that we can do that includes integrating community food and agricultural priorities into what Will had mentioned is the comprehensive community plan. With FNIB, we have community development liaison officers who help guide community health planning processes, as well as like program planning, work planning. So integrating priorities into these various plans. We can support linkages with other areas in our department, including social and education. As well as some support for education capacity and skills development. So again, if there are certain skills that community members need to advance their priorities, we can look at that as well. So we also work to coordinate food and agricultural, the ISC's priorities with other federal departments, again, through the alignment of some of our work, supporting and building ongoing strategic policies and partnerships, again, conducive to communities' goals around food and agricultural development. So the last couple of slides, these are nice pictures of some food security initiatives in the region. On the left is a community garden from Eel River Bar, and there's a gentleman's second from the right, and that's James McGraw. He's my colleague. He's the regional nutrition advisor. So some of you may have met James. On the right is a diabetes lunch and learn. So through the Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative and through some of the food security funding I had mentioned, there are a lot of community gardens or grocery store tours, fruit and vegetable box programs. So a lot of nice initiatives. Second slide or the next slide, Will. This is the school or a classroom in the school in Elsipogtog. This is another initiative through the Aboriginal Diabetes Initiative where you know the school was able to build a community garden and bring in some curriculum there, bringing the students closer to that harvesting and or processing and harvesting, learning about planting. And the last two slides, you'll see our contact information. So Will and I are happy to answer any questions or connect you with our colleagues in the department and outside of the department. And on the last slide, there are just some links, but they've all been included in the chat. So please have a look at those. And if you'd like to talk about any of them further, please reach out.
Wow, thank you, Emily and Will. That was a great presentation. I have learned so much today. Will, would you mind stopping to share your screen? I know that we've gone over time. It's 3:13, but I did want to just mention there was a question in the Q&A that it asked about have COVID-19 restrictions in the workplace put some of the AAFC programs on hold. And basically the answer was no. Everyone's been able to work from home, so programs have been moving forward as per usual. So there's been a ton of good information today. I'm really happy that we're sharing the PowerPoints because there's no way that I could do a recap of everything that we covered. So there's all kinds of great links in there that will go out to you shortly as soon as I can get them done. I am going to do a quick little poll. It's just one that says, I know there's a couple people left. So before the webinar, did you know about the Indigenous Pathfinder service, or the Indigenous food programs, Indigenous student recruitment program, agriculture research partnership opportunities, and Indigenous Services Canada programs? I mean, there was a lot that was talked about today, and I know that we have reduced our numbers because we're over time, but if anyone wants to throw in some answers, we're almost up to half right now. So yeah, so I'm just gonna quickly show this on the screen. And you'll see that 27% knew about the Indigenous Pathfinder services and only 18% knew about the Indigenous food programs. The student recruitment, only 27%. Indigenous Services Canada is doing a little bit better. It was 45%, but there's still a lot of information to get out there. And so we're so glad that we could do this webinar series. And we've covered a lot of territory, and I think it's really great. I don't see any other questions. So what I am going to do is just mention now that our last session is next Tuesday at 2 p.m. One of our sponsors will be speaking. It will be FCC for Farm Credit Canada. They'll be speaking on Indigenous agriculture with FCC. And then we'll be doing another session on working together Indigenous and government partnerships. So the Terry Sullivan, who's been in several of our sessions now, he will be talking with Jim Ward, and they're just going to be talking about a new partnership they've created, and it's going to focus on Indigenous branding about striped bass. So that's going to be interesting. It's brand new, so I'm interested to hear what's going on there. I'd like to thank our sponsors again, FCC, or Farm Credit Canada, the Government of New Brunswick, Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries, CCMB, the College Communautaire de Nouveau Brunswick, Atlantic Canada Fish Farmers, Artful Sciences, Alnoig, and Crown Plaza Fredericton. And And on that note, I'm just going to ask Alex if he has any closing words that he would like to share before we end things for today. Alex, are you still with us?
A lot of words, but I'd like to thank everybody for participating this afternoon. They were excellent presentations. There's a lot of information to chew on right now, and all the presentations are excellent, informative, and I think that that's going to go forward and help a lot of our Indigenous people to really examine agri-food and agriculture and going forward. Look forward to seeing you next week, and have a good evening, or good evening, have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks.
Pleasure.
And I'd like to echo Alex's thank you to all the speakers. There was so much great information that you shared today. We're really happy that you could join us. Yeah, just thank you all, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.